Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm your host, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. If you're new here, there's a price for the show. You have to share it with a friend or family member if you get something out of today's episode. This is a part 2, so before we dive into our guests, go back and listen to part 1 with Travis Mills and Pugh. You're going to miss a lot of really cool storytelling, a lot of really cool conversation, and it's also building the picture for this part 2. So go back, start over there. If you've listened to it previously, then you get to leave a review this time. Our guests today, I've already mentioned them. We have Mr. Travis Mills and Pugh back again. To finish a little bit of the stories that we talked about last time, we're going to dive into what MAC-V SOG is. We're going to talk a little bit more about their history in Vietnam and some of their other fun stories. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Well, we're going to dive in pretty quick with what is the history of MAC-V SOG? What is the difference between that and, I don't want to say conventional Special Forces unit, but obviously there are some separations there.
Okay. There is a separation in the sense that if you recall your history, basically, Vietnam was a CIA war, okay? In the late 1950s, early 60s. With the fall of French Indochina, early in 1954, so on and so forth, it was a CIA war. However, the fiasco of the Bay of Pigs, 1961, left a sour taste in the administration and in the military. They did not trust the CIA anymore. So after that, 1961, the CIA reputation kind of went downhill. At that time, Vietnam was under MAG, Military Advisory Assistance Group. 1962, then MAC-V came into play. That was Military Assistance Command, Vietnam. January of 1964, a charter was created, and that was Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group, MAC-V SOG, or just simply SOG, okay? The thing about SOG was it was not subordinate to the Vietnam Theater Commander. It answered directly to the Chief of Staff in the Pentagon and to the Oval Office in the White House. So there was a friction right then and there from the very beginning between SOG and the Vietnam Theater Commander and his delegated commanders underneath.
Sure.
So SOG was commanded by a senior colonel, okay? His deputy was an Air Force colonel, senior, and the budget was buried deep inside the Navy's annual budget.
So it's multi-service,
That's right. The plot thickens.
Yeah.
Now, in order for SOG to operate, it was divided up into 5 departments or ops, okay? Ops 31 was naval operations. Maritime operations. Ops 32 was air operations, your air commandos and things of that nature. Ops 33 was psychological warfare, your PSYOPs. Ops 34 was basically special operations. This is where your CIA, DIA, NSA, a bunch of alphabet people in that group.
Okay.
Ops 35, ground reconnaissance. That's where a lot of your special forces guys, Navy SEALs, and so on and so forth, Force Recon worked in that operation.
Sure.
Okay. Ops 80 was added 2 years later, and this was post-search and rescue. Post-search and rescue. And this particular ops had to deal with a lot of non-SOG personnel, so a separate cover identity was given to them, and that was JCRC, or Joint Casualty Resolution Commission. Okay? Now, you're going to say, hey, well, what happened to the Marines? You know, they've got Force Recon. The Marines are a conventional unit. You could not have conventional units do cross-border missions because that would constitute an act of war. Special Forces, on the other hand, we had 2 Americans or whatever, with an adequate number of Vietnamese or indigenous personnel, we were advisors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we could cross over into Laos, Cambodia, and other locations.
Interesting.
Okay?
You saw this really used in South America.
Right. Now, in SOG's charter authorizes to operate out of North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. Okay? With contingency planning for northern Burma, Guangxi, Guangdong, Yunnan provinces in southern China, to include Hainan Island off the coast of southern China there.
Yeah.
That was it. That was our mandate. So at the very beginning, patrols from the various A camps along the Laotian Cambodian border, they'd get lost. They'd penetrate 1, 2, maybe 3 miles into Laos and Cambodia, and then bring back a lot of good intel, you know. But what's Saigon, the White House, and the Pentagon, what they wanted was what was happening 5, 6, 7, 10 miles beyond the border.
Yeah, deeper.
So finally, in October of 1965, October 65, they opened up the first box into Laos. They went in and they brought back a ton of intel. I mean, they were just, they don't know what to do with themselves. So then they expanded that box 20 miles into Laos and Cambodia. And that was where SOG came in.
Interesting.
And so, in a sense, if you start fast forwarding kind of to JSOC, it is basically MACV-SOG in the modern era.
Yeah.
Without the MAC-V on it.
Sure. Yeah. Makes
But it's
sense.
Joint Special Operations Command.
Yeah.
So that was basically it. So that's a little bit of history.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, like Travis and I, when we were going through our training phase, we were trained to be advisors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were taught company tactics and things of that nature, an A-camp concept. All of a sudden we go to Vietnam, we're now DA, direct action.
Yeah. Vastly
So
different.
special forces are going through an evolution, growing pains. They didn't know what to do with us. In reality, Rangers could have done what we would end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were more than capable of doing it. They didn't have the clearance.
That was the big difference.
That was the big difference. They didn't have the clearance to do it.
For those cross-border operations.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
And a lot of the cross-border personnel, a lot of them were radio operators.
Okay. Oh, makes sense.
Junior operators, or E4s, E5s, and so on and so forth, junior radio operators. So, yeah.
Can you talk about, there's obviously a transition that happened with both of you that goes from those regular special forces units to MACV-SOG.
Right.
Like where was that for you? How was that recruitment? How was that draw base?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you how ours happened.
Okay.
I got in May. I arrived in May of '68 in Tonsanut, and we went down to the 90th Repo Depot at Long Bend. And the special forces at that point in time were holding all of their lieutenants. I was a lieutenant at the time. They were holding all of their lieutenants until they got promoted to first lieutenant before they sent them to Vietnam. And they sent them with direct orders to 5th Special Forces Group, because most people that came in got off that airplane totally unassigned. And MAC-V reserved the right to, if the 4th Division just got the dickens kicked out of it and they needed 20 lieutenants, first 20 lieutenants went to the 4th Division, didn't care what their order said. Okay. They had that reserved. But 5th Group got really strict about it. Number one, because we were held until we were first lieutenants, there's very little demand in regular units for first lieutenants, one per company as an XO, as opposed to 7 second lieutenants. So that was one thing that helped.
Okay.
The second thing that they did is that when they held us at Fort Bragg for that period of time, and going through our various levels of training and that type of thing, we went through a top secret crypto clearance. So we hit Vietnam with a top secret crypto clearance. So that gave us an edge also, because 5th Group could tell MACV headquarters, look, I'm running a classified operation. I got to have people with clearances.
Yeah.
That's the deal. And so leave my lieutenants alone.
Yeah. Can't touch them.
So, there were 7 of us lieutenants on that airplane. And 3 of us had been in the same OCS class and went through the SFOC course together and all of that. And we got there and we went into the adjutant at 5th Group, and he said, well, it's about lunchtime. You guys go get some chow, come back in about an hour, and we'll figure it out and where we're going to put you guys. Now, 5th Group took care of all of the A camps plus MAC-SOG and anything else. And so when we got back, he said, well, it's pretty obvious. We just got a levy from, they called it CNC at the time, from CNC, and all 7 of you guys have got top secret cryptos, so you're going to CNC. So airplane leaves in 2 hours.
And that was it.
And that was it.
Okay.
Except for me. Me and one other guy were going to CCN, and that plane had already left. So we had to wait till the next day to get up there. But that's how all of us wound up in CNC.
Okay.
Was we had top secret clearances and that kind of stuff.
Have you heard of this before?
Yes.
I mean, was it well sought after?
No.
Okay.
When we were in Fort Bragg and all that kind of stuff, and the old sergeants and some of the older lieutenants and captains, said, man, don't volunteer for CNC. Don't go to CNC.
Okay. And
I mean,
why?
it was one of them, because 100% casualty rate.
Okay. So it was terrifying.
I mean, it was one of them. Guys, they're playing hardball up there. There's no real good deals. So don't go to CNC.
Okay.
But, us being young and romping, stomping airborne troops, hey, let me on the first team. Let me go. Okay, let's go. So we got on the Blackbird and off we went.
In the meantime, these patrols are getting, swooped up and disappearing, and you're probably hearing horror stories back home.
No. You didn't hear anything. No. No.
You didn't hear anything.
No. And the thing about it also was, we didn't know that SOG and CNC were the same thing.
Okay.
People would talk about SOG and they would talk about CNC. Yeah. But you didn't know that SOG and CNC were the same thing. Yeah, it was basically, for us, in our mind, it was 2 different things.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
We totally respected our top secret clearance. And there was some talk between people. If you were in your team room or somewhere like that, but in the club or in just general conversation, whatever, there was no real talk about CNC and SOG.
Okay.
It was still kept. And as far as the other side of it, and what Gene told here, when we got there, when we got to Da Nang, which at that time was CNC headquarters, that controlled all 6 FOBs, that's where you got your first SOG briefing. And they pulled the thing back and started talking about where we were going and what we were doing. And then they got to, you're going in totally sterile. There's no ID card, no dog tags, nothing. You'll carry non-American weapons. You'll wear non-American uniforms and all of this stuff. And if you get caught, we never heard of you. That's just the way it is, guys. Now, if you don't want to sign up for that, there's the door.
How many people stood up?
And fine, you can go back down to 5th Group and they'll assign you to 4th Infantry Division or something like that. I don't care. But he said, this is what you're getting into. They didn't lie to us.
No,
they said, this is it.
And what's the emotions going on in your
Well,
head?
there's a lot of eyes, big.
Yeah, a lot of, like, oh my God.
What did I get myself into?
Yeah. And the thing about it was that it's a lot of peer pressure also.
Yeah. You don't want to be the one to go to the door.
You don't want to be the guy going out the door. You volunteered for this. This is what you signed up for. So, let's tighten up that belt and suck it up. And this is it. And then, of course, you have that I'm bulletproof.
Yes.
Yeah. Young and invincible.
I'm invisible, I'm bulletproof. I can do it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense. We've all been there.
And there was quite a bit of camaraderie there with once you got into CNC.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm on the real team here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on the A team.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a lot of bravado and whatever there.
Of course.
We're up there at the top level of the game here.
At that time, we were kind of like the elite within the elite.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we kind of knew it. I mean, within ourselves, we knew it, that we were, the top dog and everything else. And the thing about it also was the relationship that we had with each other in the sense of with the officer cadre and what have you. It was very, very tight.
Yeah. One of the things that you found in all your SOG camps, we had one club. There was no officer, no NCO club. It was one club. And officer and an NCO have an argument, and they go outside, take their shirts off, pound each other's head in the sand, come back in, buy each other a drink. I mean, that was just it. That's the way it was. We were all one group. As a matter of fact, when the rules as in the 1-0 type thing, that the most experienced guy was the 1-0, and he was in charge.
Regardless of rank.
Regardless of rank. When I come out of the hatchet force and went into recon company and went on to a recon team, I was a first lieutenant. My boss was an E6. He was the 1-0.
Okay.
Hatcher. Was,
Yep, right. Hatcher, yeah.
He was the 1-0. And that was it.
The way it worked.
And rounds camp and everything else, we didn't wear we just wore tiger suits or whatever, had no rank, didn't make no difference. We called each other Fred and Jim and, hey, that kind of stuff. It was, we were just all one group. And it didn't really make any difference. The camaraderie was really, really thick.
So go ahead. Oh, so were you guys? I know you talked about being in 6- and 8-man teams. Was that pretty typical team size?
It really was, and sometimes
depended on the mission.
And the mission, because for example, if you would go, let's say that you were going to land at a very high altitude in one of the mountains up there.
Sure.
And you were going to be landing up, and let's say take you up. Your taxi was going to be an H-34 King Bee. Okay. You're dealing with density altitude.
Yep.
And you would want to go in one helicopter, if all possible.
Fewer people.
Okay, fewer people. He'd not be able to climb up to, 3,000 or 4,000 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
Because of density altitude. And so, and again, the mission dictated the size of the team going in.
Yeah, if you took over 6 people, you had to have 2 ships in.
Right.
And the longer it took to get in and out, the more, the more danger you got into.
So the reason I ask, so were you guys in dedicated hard crews, like the same 6 guys that you were on a team with, or 8 guys? Was it typically the same 6 or 8 guys on every mission, or would you change it up every once in a while? Was that mission dependent?
Normally, a team on the board had 12 members.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you separated them. Some of them were sick. Some of them needed to go on leave and that type of thing or whatever.
Okay.
But everybody trained, and then you would pick specific people.
Yeah.
If one of them was better at demolitions or one of them was better at another skill, you might pick him for a particular mission as opposed to one of the other guys.
So would you have like several radio guys on the team too? Like
Indigenous.
Okay.
Indigenous. For example, whenever you did a POW
radio
snatch,
guy was me.
well, yeah. And the thing about it was, even though you had one on the roster, would be like your 1-2 would be the radio guy in name only, but the guy that carried the radio was the 1-0, the team leader. Now, if you were doing a POW snatch, and again, depending how far you were going out and so on and so forth, there were a lot of parameters with it, you would go in heavy.
Yeah.
Okay? You would go in heavy. You would have a 10-man team, even, or I've heard of 12-man teams going in to do a POW, and you would take 3 Americans with you. Okay? It was very critical to get a POW. So again, there was really no cut and dry, 6-man, 8-man, whatever. It comes down to the mission itself.
Well, that makes it even more difficult in the training environment, because if you're on a 6-man team and you're with those 6 men 6 months prior to deployment, you're on the deployment with those 6 men, it makes the camaraderie much easier. It makes understanding those individuals a lot easier, especially if you're out every single day with them.
Right.
But if you're changing it up, now you all have to be very comfortable with each other and understand your faults too, right? Understand where you need to pick up someone's slack.
For example, a lot of times you would have 2 men assigned to your recon team, two Americans. Let's say you had 2 Americans assigned, but all of a sudden you go, hey, you're going to do a POW snatch. Hey, Trav, you busy in the next couple of days? Nah, come along. So we'd snatch him up and off we go.
We called them strap hangers.
Strap hangers.
I think it's also important to note when you say POW snatch, it's not as simple as people will hear in our audience.
It was quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of like peel that back a little bit. What that looked like from an operational capacity, why it's so important. I mean, obviously gaining intel, but can you break that down a little bit for our audience?
Let's say we're going to go with POW snatch. Okay, go to the 12-man team, 3 Americans, 9 indigenous personnel. You would, first of all, find the ideal trail. Finding the ideal trail, there's no such thing as an ideal POW snatch trail. You're going to get the best you can, okay? And for an example, you have your flankers left and right and so on and so forth. You're there. You got your claymores set up to do, the snatch.
That's one of the secrets is the claymores.
The claymores, okay? And
Chaos as well.
Blast left and you have that, what we call
You set
the
up,
zone.
You're in a safe zone, and the guy you want is the one right here.
In the center.
The BB's missing, but he gets the blast and knocks him totally unconscious.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the whole thing. And you wipe out the other guys.
Other guys.
Oh my
left,
God.
Oh, yeah.
So you blast it, leave one guy in the middle, and you got two men. Their job, as soon as that blast goes off, out there, grab that guy and jerk him, and then
because he's dazed.
You're out of here.
You're out of there.
You're on the horn saying, I got a prayer fire. We got a POW. We're on the way to launch the choppers.
Right.
And you just run like hell.
That's why you had the 3rd American. The 3rd American is over there with the radio. He is not there at the blast site. You have your 2 Americans there dealing with that. So your 3rd American is with the radio.
Wow.
Okay? So once you blast your claymores out there, you rush out there, make sure that he's okay. There have been accidents.
I'm sure. Not
There have
perfect
been
science.
accidents where that first clacker or the second clacker didn't go off as planned. And the guy that you wanted to get got into that blast. And like I said, accidents do happen.
Sure.
But let's say that you didn't happen. And it becomes a race, because then you have to tie the guy. He's not, and you have to basically put him over your shoulder and off you go.
Yeah.
And it's a big race.
Yeah, and one of the other, again, because there had been, quote, accidents, somebody come up with a brilliant idea, and if you were going out, you carried a silenced 22 caliber pistol, and that was to shoot him in the leg and just disable him, so that you could
While they scream.
so you could run out and somebody go out and grab him and subdue him and get him back in. But as it turned out, you know how accurate one of those are.
Yeah,
So they wound up hitting him in the chest. So
Right. Not only that, but POW snatch is probably one of the dangerous missions around, because you have to stay static the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And prime example, all of a sudden you get your flanker and he's saying, hey, you got 7 guys coming through. And all of a sudden he disappears. And then he pops up ahead and he goes, and you let the 7 guys go by, and you're trying to figure out, why are you letting the 7 guys go by? And then all of a sudden, for the next 20 minutes, there's this whole freaking battalion marching in front of you.
Man.
and that was that was the big risk you took on that when you set those claymores off, because very seldom did just one squad come down the trail by themselves out on the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Especially with the POW. in
So,
tow.
there's usually a whole big bunch either down that way or back this way somewhere. That's why when you hit him, you grab him and you take off running just as fast as you can, because
And
they're coming
hit or
after you.
miss intel, right?
Right, it is. And another thing, too, is the fact a lot of people say, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Well, there's a lot of secondary high-speed trails that come off of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And those are the trails that we normally ran into. That's where your battalion, regimental headquarters, and so on and so forth are off of them. There are some along the Ho Chi Minh Trail itself, a lot of road parks and so on and so forth. But you have a lot of secondary high-speed trails that come off of them. He can tell you more about it than I can, because, they were, we're talking 75 or George Bush. They're wide. And you're going, this is a secondary high-speed trail? My God, they are wide. They look like a freaking freeway.
And they pull the trees over
like that.
like this, so you can't see it from the air.
There.
Absolutely amazing. And one of the most amazing things that I saw was you could put in a B-52 strike and just totally destroy that highway. And within 36 hours, it was repaired. And they were running trucks on it again. Wow. They had thousands of people in forced labor.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, they would, and a 500-pound bomb put the hell of a hole in the ground.
Absolutely.
And when you got 34 of them in a line, it really messes the road up. But within 36 hours, that road would be functional again.
Wow.
It's amazing what they could do.
Man.
And
looking like ants over there, yeah.
Yeah.
But
like ants.
a POW was so valuable because he could tell you a lot of things. How many people was in your unit? Where did you come from? How many days have you spent on the trail? How many kilometers per day did you go, and all that kind of stuff and everything. And so we could really, and that was one thing that even if all you did was lay beside the trail and try to identify a bunch of these people coming by, then hopefully another team somewhere else down the trail would see them again, and you could kind of calculate how fast they were moving down the trail and what unit they were in and all that kind of stuff. So it was intelligence gathering.
It's all about that intelligence gathering so that in South Vietnam,
Right.
they could operate effectively and efficiently.
True. Another thing too, sometimes, and this happened to me, Colonel Warren, he saw me walking down. In fact, I was in front of the club, and he stopped his Jeep and he says, "You're the guy I want to talk to." I go, "Oh, crap, what did I do?" And then Ricardo Davis comes out of the club and he goes, "You, come with me." Ricardo Davis goes like, "What did you do?" No, "What did you do?" No. So he takes us back over to the talk, puts us in there, and he pulls back the curtain. And he goes, "Okay, now we had this unit come here. They were spotted there. They were spotted there. They weren't there, and they weren't there. What do you think? You've worked this area before. Are there any trails in here that you think, So that's what he was doing. He was trying to get more and more information, something that perhaps Saigon missed.
Sure.
And you stayed there for about 20 minutes or whatever it was, and then he goes, "Go down to the club. I've got a beer on your, on my tab." So go down there, and that was it. But Colonel Warren was a strange kind of a guy. World War II Korean vet. He loved the recon teams. Loved them, backed them up. And he would back you up in front of other officers. Now, afterwards, he would pick you back in the office and he would go, "Yeah," But in front, he would back you up. Loved him or hate him, but he was that kind of an officer.
Speaks volumes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was it. Yeah.
I love hearing these little tidbits of information and stuff that we wouldn't normally hear ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was the officer corps that we had were I mean, you're looking at right here. I mean, they were awesome.
Yeah.
They were great. They were like sponges. And like I mentioned earlier, is that we learned more at the club and at the hooches. We all sat around, got a beer, and you ran such a target, what was it like? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, you start connecting pieces.
So you start connecting pieces, and so
and that's the format that I used when I set up the 1-0 school.
Okay.
And because I had Colonel Johnson and Colonel Kavanaugh, Chief SOG and Chief Op 35, told me I would have good instructors, and they made good on their word. Every one of the instructors we had 6 FOBs, and I got one instructor from each FOB. He was a very seasoned 1-0 or 1-1 on that team, had been on the ground, had been across the fence several times, and knew what he was doing, had a good reputation. And so I would get them usually for a cycle lasted 3 weeks, so I could hold one for 2 cycles, and then I'd have to rotate them again. They'd bring me in another guy. But these guys were old hands, been there, done that.
Okay.
And so how we decided to set the thing up was when we got our students, and we usually got in about 20 students at a time. And these guys, it was usually their first time in Vietnam, and first time ever to hear about SOG recon teams or anything like that. They were really young green troops.
Sure.
But we were losing people so fast, they were going to be on the ground in a week. Yeah. So we had to do something because we were losing people, a lot of people. And so how we decided to do this is we would have a particular subject, whether it be picking your RON and spending the night in the RON, or how to move in the mountainous terrains, or how to do this, or particular things. probably the two things we did more than anything else was the IA drills, going through the drills of what you actually do. And the other thing was how you pack that rucksack and how you put your uniform
tests,
on.
Right.
You wanted that uniform on. I could make that guy stand there and jump up and down.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear one single rattle.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's got to be quiet. I want your rucksack packed exactly like mine. If I'm looking for a claymore and I don't have my rucksack, I know where's one in yours.
Yeah.
And I can reach in there and get it. I know where to get a smoke grenade. I know where to get an extra magazine or whatever. So, I mean, those are the things. And so what we would do is we'd have subject matter and we'd have one of the people would be in charge, let's say Squirrel Sprouts.
Right. Squirrel.
And he would say, okay, this is what we're talking about here. And he'd give a little 5-minute deal. And he says, okay, we're going to be packing our rucksack. And he'd give them a general view, and he says, okay, what's your questions about that? And then it just became just like we were sitting around the table at the club saying, yeah, or how do you get rid of trackers? What do you do when you got trackers? Okay, you got this guy said, well, I had trackers in Oscar 8.
Right.
And this is how we did it. This is how that we dealt with it. This guy over here says, yeah, we tried that and it didn't work, but this is what we did. And it did it over here. So we got like, this is coming straight from the horse's mouth, guys. This is the real stuff. This is not theory that some guy at the infantry school dreamed up and wrote in a manual. This is real stuff,
You're
guys.
swapping TTPs and,
Right.
and getting better all in the same.
And so our school was very, very successful in that when this guy left our little school, he could go back and get on a team and make a significant contribution to that team. The 1-0 didn't have time to train him, but so he could come in. He wasn't going to be a fully qualified 1-0, but he could be a damn good 1-1.
Sure. Yeah, good enough.
And he knew what he was doing. Plus, he'd probably been under fire because the Army says if you have a school, you have to have an FTX. I hated that word, FTX. What we did, we went to Khartoum, FOB2, and they were heavily taxed. And I usually had 4 teams. We took 4 targets. Our students, for their graduation, went across the fence. If you come back, you graduate.
Yeah.
Trial by fire.
I had people killed on my FTX.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they went
didn't
up
graduate.
against real targets out there.
Yeah.
They didn't graduate.
They didn't graduate.
They've been in country 3 weeks,
Wow.
and
That quick.
we're out across the fence.
The best way to learn.
And
So you were tasked specifically to stand up this 1-0 school?
yes,
Okay. And you said it was Colonel Kavanaugh?
yes,
He went on to start the ground branch and the CIA and the SEER school and all
Right.
that too, right?
yeah, Colonel Kavanaugh was a great guy. Colonel Kavanaugh was your absolute epitome of an officer, gentleman, all that kind of stuff.
Tell them the story about
Colonel
Johnson.
Colonel Johnson, he had the demeanor of a charging rhinoceros. I mean, he chomped on a cigar all the time. I mean, he would eat your butt out and scream and yell.
Yeah.
He worked for Patton in World War II.
No shit.
Wow.
He was a platoon leader. And let me tell you, he was tough, but he was fair.
He was fair.
He was fair, but he was tough.
He was told the colonel that he felt that he should go back to lead a recon team. Words were exchanged. Usually it was one way though.
Well, what he said when I told him I wanted to go back to because I'd been there probably about 3 or 4 cycles, that type thing. And when I went down there, I had just got back out of the hospital. And so they had this requirement to send down a 1-0 qualified officer to stand up this 1-0 school. And so I was working for Major Toomey at the time in the S3 air shop. And so he says, hey, this will be a good chance. You go down there, you get all healed up. You can come back up here and have your team back, and, we'll all be happy campers again. I said, okay. So I'd been down there for like 4 cycles or so, and so I decided it was time for me to go back. So I had to go into Saigon and take in some paperwork and do some stuff. So I went in with the courier, and so I went in to see Colonel Johnson. And and I told him that I went through this whole deal about I've been here, I've done this, all that kind of stuff. It's time for me to go back. And he's sitting there very quietly, chomping on that cigar, took his cigar out of his mouth, said, Lieutenant, I realize I'm getting older, and I realize my memory's not what it used to be. And his voice went from that to about like a B-52 taking off at the sound level. And he said, but I don't remember asking you what the hell you wanted to do. He said, the last time I read the manual, lieutenants do not tell colonels what the hell they want to do. Colonels tell lieutenants what they will do. And like I say, the voice was about at a B-52 takeoff. And he said, do I need to explain that more? No, I said, no, sir. I saluted, about face, and out of the office I went. The courier wasn't through yet, so I was sitting down out there waiting, letting my pants heal off. And the aide come out the door and said, he wants to see you again. Oh, my God. He didn't get enough. So I go back in and I report, and he was very, very calm and everything. And he says, Lieutenant, he said, believe it or not, I was a lieutenant once upon a time. I understand how you feel. I do. He said, if I had my way, I wouldn't be sitting here behind this desk. I'd be out here running a battalion or a regiment, and I'd be kicking ass and taking names. But he said, somebody higher than me decided that I was going to be a staff officer this time around. Mm-hmm. And he said, and everybody can't be the star running back or the quarterback. Somebody's got to block.
Yeah.
And he said, Lieutenant, unfortunately for you, it's your turn to block. And your job is to go back out to that camp and you make that the best damn school in this country.
Wow.
Can you do that? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And so I went back to Longton. It was about an hour and a half drive back out there. And by the time I got there, I'd figured out that, okay, this is where I need to be. I'm a good instructor. I got good instructor skills. I got good management skills, and I got a bunch of good instructors. And our job is to keep these guys alive on their first 2 missions. Mm. That's your job.
It's a lot of responsibility too.
And so I did. And I'll put one little thing here. 40 years later, I have a brother that lives down in near Houston. He's retired SF guy as well. Okay. And we were down there one holiday, and he's a member of the Special Forces chapter down there, and he was having the Special Forces chapter meeting at his house. So there was a bunch of guys around, and I knew quite a few of the guys from the Houston area and that type of stuff. So we're all sitting around in his garage drinking beer and telling lies. You know how it is. And I said something about when I was down at the 1-0 school, and this guy on the other side of the room over there, he kind of perked up and he walked over to me and he says, were you at the 1-0 school? I said, yes, sir, I was. I was the OIC of the 1-0 school. And I didn't know if he was going to slap me or what he was going to do. But he said, mister, I want to shake your hand. He said, you and the guys at the 1-0 school saved my life. He said, I would have never survived the first 2 missions had I not been to that 1-0 school.
Wow.
Wow. And then it's
So
all sank in 40 years later.
all of a sudden it says, I did something right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it was good. And I've heard other people say that other people have said that got them through the first couple of times. That if they'd have went out there cold, they'd have never made it back.
Wow.
Makes it all worth it.
Man, that's fantastic. Well, yeah, you did right by them, and you obviously took it very seriously. It's a lot of responsibility to be training somebody for that type of position, especially within an elite special operations unit.
We got people killed on our FTX.
Sure, yeah.
They went up against a good target.
Yeah,
And got in a firefight, and it just happens. Unfortunately, in a war, people get killed.
this is true. Or they get shot 5 times.
But I can tell you this: the next class through after the first one, the next class through paid a lot stricter attention.
Oh yeah.
Because word got out immediately. They're serious down there, guys. You can get killed going to that school.
yeah.
I think Christian brings up a good point here. We jumped into your ability to, teach the 1-0 school, but you had mentioned that he's been shot 5 times. I think that's
I was
something-
going to get to that.
Yeah.